Hi, and welcome to today's College Essay Pro Chat. Today we're talking about essay reviews, how to be efficient, how to be effective, and how not to take too much time and overwhelm yourself. I encourage you to put questions in the chat or the question box. I have dozens and dozens of them here from those of you who registered ahead of time. I will answer as many of your questions as I can. And if I don't answer your question, you are welcome always to reach out to me, Susan at wowwritingworkshop.com. So let's dive in. Let's talk about essay reviews. To start, before we go any further, I want to show you something. I'm going to share my screen and I want to make sure that you are very clear on our method because this matters. This is a big deal. If you do not already know what I'm talking about, it will be harder to follow along with my discussion. So I'm going to put this in the chat. I'm going to put a link to a graphic in the chat if you don't already have it, and I'm going to share it on my screen. This is the 10-step WOW method. The document I just shared with you has 2 pages. The first page has the 10 steps in detail. I'm not going to go through all of them in detail today. The second page is a fillable PDF. You can make notes. You can use it with students. I welcome you to use our handouts. I'm sharing this because I'm talking about essay reviews today, and I want to distinguish between 3 kinds of review. There's a content review. That's what happens here in step 6. In fact, we review the theme before a student even goes on to write an essay. I'm not going to get a lot into that. I'm going to talk more about what do you do after you have a draft. In our method, for those of you who've been through our training, those of you who are in our partners program, this is familiar to you. You've heard me say this 1,000 times. Most students, most counselors, most parents, most English teachers start with step 2. Brainstorm ideas, and then they jump directly to writing a first draft. This is important when I talk about reviews in a moment. Students don't understand the prompt. It might seem like they should. The questions and the prompts are not that complicated. But most students don't understand the prompts, and most of the problems come because they don't understand who they're writing for, why they're writing a college essay, what the individual questions mean, and how they can effectively respond to the prompt. So, if they understand the prompt, review is easier. Also, most people go straight from brainstorming ideas to writing a draft. They don't focus on theme. Make sure your student knows what they're going to write about and why. Any essay, Common App essay, personal statement, that's easy. What happened? Why does it matter? We like to focus on an anchor story and a characteristic. That helps us keep our students focused. But you can use this idea for any kind of essay. What are you going to write about and why? So then your review is based on what you've agreed on with the student. If for some reason you haven't agreed on anything with the student ahead of time because it's not part of what you do, you're in a school, you have too many students, ask them. Before you write a draft, I want you to know what you're going to write about and why. And then I want you to share that with me. Give me the prompt and the theme. So I'm going to assume in my discussion today that a student understands the prompt and they have a theme. Why? Because it is nearly impossible to review your way out or edit your way out of a poorly conceived idea. If anyone could do it, it would be me. And it is very hard. It is very, very hard to help a student insert the components that they didn't include in the first place because they didn't understand the prompt or they weren't really clear on why they chose a topic other than maybe it is interesting to them or it sounds unique. We'll talk a little bit more about that. So, a content review is just for content. Content only. I'm not concerned about word choice. I'm not concerned about where the paragraphs are. I'm not concerned about their first line. A structure review includes a little bit more on content, but really is about how do you move through the essay. And a polish review is crossing the T's, dotting the I's, making sure that all the stuff is in place. This is important because you need to know where you are in the process. If you don't know where you are in the process, and I just put this handout into the chat again, if you don't know where you are in the process. Reviewing is incredibly challenging for you and the student. And this is when we get into dozens of reviews. You know, I'm reviewing 6 drafts, 10 drafts. I don't want you to go there. For those of you who are not on this call, who don't see the chat, you go to my website. There's a link. It says, give me the 10 steps. You can get your own copy. So I'm not going to keep this up here the whole time, but I want you to be thinking in terms of what step am I on? Where am I in the process? So let's get to your questions. And like I said, feel free to add more questions in the chat and the Q&A. So Heidi says, how do we help them edit without doing it for them? Such a good question. How do we help them edit without doing it for them? We ask questions. So the word I like to use is review. We are reviewers. We are coaches. I am not an editor. Actually, I'm a very good editor. If any of you adults wanted me to edit your work, I'd be happy to do it because you're an adult and I'm an adult and I'm a professional and you're a professional. I don't edit student work. I make observations, I ask questions, I reflect, and I teach students to make editorial decisions. So you might be saying, well, how am I supposed to do that? I don't know how to do that. You can learn how. Those of you who've been through our training, you know how. If you're still having trouble, let us know and we'll help you out. But I'm telling you this because I want you to think not I have to fix broken things, but I need to review. I need to see what the student has done. I need to make sure that they have the tools they need to make editorial choices. And then I need to step out of the way because they might not make the choices that I would make. They might not be capable of making the choices I would make. I'm an adult. I'm a professional. I'm a professional writer. You don't have to be a professional writer. You don't even have to be a great editor to help students make editorial choices because you want to give them the framework and the tools. So the question that Heidi said is, how do we help them edit without doing it for them? We don't do it for them. We help them establish a theme for their essay. We review their first draft and say, does this convey what you wanted it to convey? Does it answer the prompt? Did this story you're talking about or the examples you're using, are they relatively recent? Don't tell me about when you were 7 years old. And do you share some positive characteristic, even in a supplemental essay? The question can be, tell me about, why you want to come here, what you want to major in. I still need to learn about you. What are you going to include and why? So you can read a content draft and say, what do you want to include and why? Oh, look, you got it. You got it. Too much what happened, too much story. I need a little more of the why does this matter? Why are you telling me this? You don't have to tell them where to put it. You don't have to tell them how many sentences to write. In fact, the exercise we use, and for those of you who've done college essay experience, those of you who are in our partners program, go back to your resources, find this exercise. For us, it's step 6, part 1, writing outside the essay. Ask your questions and have the student write outside the essay. You're not fixing broken things. You're teaching them how to think like a writer. And a writer sometimes has to step outside of their work in order to come back in. Once you get to structure, now it's how much time should we spend on each of these elements of your essay? How does it open? How does it close? How do you move through it? And then the polish review is, I'm not going to comment on your topic anymore. I'm not going to tell you I don't like your first sentence. I'm not going to cut a sentence in half. I'm going to make sure your punctuation is right. I'm going to make sure you haven't misspelled anything. I'm looking for run-on sentences. Simple, simple, simple. We're not creating editorial masterpieces. We're helping students convey who they are to people who have a lot of other quantitative data about them. The essay has a role, and help your students make sure it achieves what it's supposed to achieve, and that's how you can be the best reviewer. MK says, what to do when everything seems on track, but then the first draft comes back off topic? We go back to the theme. We say, you said you wanted to write about this, and here's why. You've missed that. Here's my question for you. And I say this to students. Are you changing direction? And if so, I'd like a new theme. Please send me back a note. What are you writing about and why? They need to know why. And if they say, no, I still have the theme I had, then you go back and say, well, I need more about this and I need more about this, write about. That helps them. Sometimes students lose track of the why and they start writing about something and they're off to the races describing the room and the house and the neighborhood. And you say, excuse me, I thought that the reason you were talking about that experience with your grandmother in the living room was because it showed how resilient and respectful you are. We need to go back to that. I don't need all the details. Okay, so that's what we do there. Um, what else? Let's see. Karen says, how much feedback is helpful? How much is doing too much editing for the student? And what if they get stuck in reducing word count? Aha, word count. This, for those of you who are using our method, this happens in step 7 often. Students write a draft. So in step 5, they write their first draft. Like I said, whether you're using our method or not, this will help you. And the first draft is a content draft. It doesn't matter how long it is. It doesn't matter if it wanders. It doesn't matter if the first line is beautiful or not. I want my students, I tell them, 1 or 2 hours max on this first draft. I do not want you to spend the weekend trying to make it perfect because you're going to write multiple drafts whether you like it or not, whether you need it or not, and you need it. So the next draft is after they've done some content exercises and they've planned their next draft. Some of them take that seriously, some of them don't. That's okay. The next draft is the one that we're seriously going to revise. This is the point at which it starts to feel more like a familiar revision process to the counselor and the student. And the draft comes back and I've told them I want it to be within the word count. And let's say it's a Common App personal statement and they've written 900 words. So I send it back and I say, hey, I need this to be under 650. Maybe if you get to 700, we'll deal with it. And they say, well, how am I supposed to do that? And I say, give it a shot. You try first. And then if you get stuck, you let me know. I want you to keep what's essential. This word is important. Thank you, Joe Kane, one of our senior coaches. Keep what's essential. Keep what's going to help you convey your theme. That doesn't mean keep your prettiest sentences. It doesn't mean keep your favorite line. I want you to keep what's essential. Again, making sure students, we say understand the prompt, understand the task. What are they doing? Why are they doing this? To convey something meaningful about themselves that's not already in the application. Most students can do it. They really can. What we're doing is we're teaching them how to see our essay, how to see their essay, how to look at what they've already written. So this is why I say you're a reviewer, you're not an editor. It's not your job to pick the 100 words to get rid of. If they go through multiple drafts and they've cut words and they've worked hard, sure, I can help them later. But not until they try it themselves, because usually they can do it themselves. It's the same thing with misspellings and punctuation problems. I don't fix them in the first draft. I don't know if those words are going to end up in the final draft. And furthermore, often once they read their own work a couple times, they find a lot of those mistakes. I don't need to do it for them. I just need to give them space and time. Veronica says, I have a caseload of about 50 students. I need to learn how to efficiently review so many essays. Also, most of my students are stumped when they begin to write and they write boring essays. I'd like them to create, brainstorm more creative topics. I meet with my students only one by one, so it's very challenging to help them all. Great. Okay. 50 students. It's a lot of kids. If you're in a school, that's kind of a small caseload, but it's a lot. If you're an independent, that's a huge caseload. I am going to say that your best bet, first of all, is not to worry about if they're writing boring essays. Some students are going to write boring essays, or it'll sound boring to you because you've read 1,000 of them. Make sure they're effective. Make sure they understand the prompt. Help them choose. I would rather that a counselor with a caseload of 50 students do a group workshop on how to choose a topic, spend a half an hour with every single student, making sure they have a topic that works, that's effective, have a theme, and then let them write and don't ever talk to them again. Now, that's not realistic, but what I'm saying is you can't revise them out of a poorly conceived idea. And if they don't have a strong idea, there's not a lot to say to them later. So maybe their essays are boring because they don't really understand what they're doing and they pick the easiest things to write about, or they pick things that they think make them sound unique and you know that that's not the purpose of the essay. So reviewing an essay, when I do workshops for schools, and those of you who are in schools, contact me. I can tell you more about this. When I do workshops for schools, I meet with the counselors and the English teachers and whoever else in your school is the one that kids like to show their essays to. And we all get on the same page. And I say, they need a theme. No one gets a review without a theme. Why? Because having that theme and a couple other steps that come before it demonstrates understanding of the task. Think like a teacher. Think like a teacher. I am an instructional designer. I'm an educator. I think like a teacher. I want to make sure they understand before I send them to do anything. Check for understanding. The reason we get essays that don't work is because kids are just looking at samples and getting bad advice on the internet and asking ChatGPT what they should write about or any number of AI essay tools that are out there. You know what those tools do? They say, give me a million things about you and I'll tell you what to write. Put your essay in here and I'll fix it for you. I teach people not to do that. I don't want machines to be doing it for my students, and you don't either. One day, maybe there'll be an AI tool. Maybe I'll invent it. That'll really help us with essay coaching, but so far we're not there. So don't do those things. Help your students understand the task, understand the prompt, and to recognize what phase they're in. Make sure your students know the difference between the content phase, the structure, and the polish. They can't do it all at once. I'm a professional writer and a creative writer, and I can't do it all at once. I have to think content first. And so I teach my students to do the same. Sarah says, tips on helping students cut those final 50 words. I'll go back to what I said. And Sarah, I believe you have access to one of these templates also. So check your materials. Um, we have a template that is about cutting the last 50 words. Sarah, if you can't find it, let me know and I will show it to you. Anyone who's in Partners or College Essay Experience has these email templates. It's Joe Kane saying, keep what's essential. Here's how to think about it. And we give them some tips. Look for adverbs, think about this, think about your verbs. They can get rid of 50 words and it's not a bad skill for them to learn now. And it's something that you can do too if you absolutely need to. Jennifer says, I meet with students 2 to 3 a week to ensure results I like. How can I pare that down to achieve the same results? Written feedback is your friend. I know a lot of you, especially if you're in private practice, you're high touch, you want your students to feel seen, you want to make sure they do their work because sometimes they don't if you're not sitting next to them. Train them from the beginning of the process that writing and revising is something that you do in a quiet room by yourself. It's not a thing I do sitting next to you. I need to be very efficient and clear in my comments, and I, as a coach, need to know where we are in the process in order to give appropriate feedback. So in the content phase, my feedback is more of this, expand on this, try this, think about this, try this new opening, not because I don't like your opening, but because it's going to help open up ideas for you. I need to understand more about your characteristics. I want more context. Give me another example. Those are content review questions. Structure is, when I gave you that question about writing more about this experience or another experience similar to it that you mentioned in our brainstorm, you wrote a great paragraph and you didn't include it in this draft. I want more of that. I need you to put more of that in, and this paragraph over here, you can cut it in half. It's lovely, but you need space. Those are structure comments. And then finally, polish is, you have a thing with run-on sentences. I've highlighted one and fixed it. I want you to find the rest of them. And we can fix them together or you can fix them yourself. Here's how you use a comma or a semicolon or a period to cut it in half. Those are different kinds of comments. So I can do that in writing. And then if a student needs more clarification, I can get on a 10-minute call with them and do that. But I don't want them thinking of this like piano lessons. If I didn't do my work, if I didn't practice, we'll do scales, we'll do sight reading, whatever. There's something else we can do. So someone said, do we put questions here in the Q&A? It doesn't matter. Just anywhere is fine. I will find them. So so regarding meetings, I know people love meetings and I'm not opposed to them. We only have one meeting, usually per essay or sometimes a couple meetings per school. Our coaches do meet with their students weekly, except in the middle of writing their first essay, because I'm reinforcing that they can write on their own. They can write on their own. Ashley says, how do you get them to the word count without losing the important details? You have everything they've written. If they cut something you don't think they should have cut, you can say, I think you need to keep this. Why don't you cut this instead? That's where you're trading back and forth. They might not get it right. They've never done this before. That's why their ideas, their initial ideas are going to be cliche and boring, and they happened when they were 12, and they're things you've heard before. But those are conversation starters. Those are not final ideas that you're just going to choose from. You don't have to teach them how to come up with amazing ideas. You don't need to mine for gold. You need to help them understand what makes an effective topic. And if you can, if you are able to, then have a conversation with them about those ideas or give them guidelines to choose from among their ideas or develop those ideas further. And then once they write, you can review. Another question, what if they're really struggling with a topic? Have a student whose anchor story is learning to ride her bike with her friend as a child. I know they should pick something more recent, but she literally won't change it, can't change direction. She focuses on how her best friend makes her feel brave. Thoughts. She doesn't understand the prompt. So, my next question to a student like this, way back before the first draft, is this story shows something about someone else. I don't learn anything about you. Now, do you feel brave? Great. Tell me about a time recently when you felt brave. Now her anchor story can become context. It's going to get smaller. You're going to want to give her an exercise to say, now write more about that time that you felt brave. The time that your friend helped you was a great anchor story to get you started. I mean, maybe it's not, but it's okay. We don't want to make her feel bad at this point. Now I want you to focus on your feeling of bravery now, and you're going to use that experience with your friend to reflect back and show us how you got here. That will work. That has generally worked for us. We don't want to tell students you're absolutely wrong. Often in a brainstorm discussion, we can say, I know this is an important story for you, but this tells me more about your friend than it does about you. So let's come, not, I need a story that happened more recently, but tell me about a time more recently when you felt like this. And they can usually shift gears. Kelly says, do you allocate a certain amount of time per student per essay? We do. 4 to 6 hours for the first essay and 4 to 6 hours for every school after that. We've done time studies a couple different times. We have email templates. If you don't have ours, I recommend that you create your own. We have standard writing exercises that everybody gets every step of the way. Again, if you don't have ours, you need to create your own. Just this, let's talk and you write and I'll get back to you and it'll take a couple hours doesn't work. I did it that way when we started this business 16 years ago, but the only way we've been able to really manage this process and do what we do for all of you and for our students is to make sure that we are absolutely consistent in how we work with our students and how we use our time. Keep track of how much time you spend. If there's not an average, then you're missing something. You should, on average, be spending the same amount of time with the student and on your own. You should be able to quickly review an essay, 20 minutes maybe, because you know what you're looking for. Work on that skill and you will be amazing. Anybody who hasn't done our training yet, we have a couple of sessions open this fall. I just put the link in the chat. I encourage you, I know it's a busy time. I know this may seem like, why would I possibly do training in the fall? It's 4 weeks, it's 15 hours of your time. You get all the resources, all the training materials, all the writing exercises, all the email templates, all the review guidelines, everything I've just said. Very, very valuable. I want to answer a couple more questions before we move on. Let's see. Tara says, how can I help a student who has come back for a second or third meeting and hasn't done any revisions? Let them be done. This actually goes back to what I was just saying about written feedback. I need a revised essay if I am going to talk to a student, or I need a very specific question. I didn't understand what you meant about this. Oh, let me explain that to you. So instead of meeting and saying, bring me your revised essay, we'll look at it together, we say, I'm going to give you feedback. And I'd like you to send me your revised essay. And then I'm going to give you more feedback. And if you have a question, here are 6 ways to reach me. We can have another meeting. We can chat. We can text. We can talk, whatever. But I don't talk to my students unless there's something to talk about. And either we're talking about what they don't understand or what they still need help with, or we're talking about the changes they've already made. We do not meet to revise in person. They can do it. These kids are going to college. If they can't work on their own without you, that's a different problem. That's not a college essay problem. Question here. How do you deal with super shy students who struggle to share anything about themselves? We we say to them, I know it's hard. If you'd rather keep it small, that's okay. Tell me one good thing about you. Anything. I work hard. I'm nice to my sister. It can be anything. We keep it small. One of the ways to get better results is to lower the stakes. Lower the stakes, you get better results. Shy students can do this. We've had plenty of shy students go through our process especially because they don't have to talk to me through everything. They're doing work ahead of time. I'm looking at it, I'm responding to it, then I'm talking to them. Then they're writing and I'm cheering them on, lots of positive feedback and reinforcement. Lower the stakes. They often don't want to talk about themselves because they don't think they're interesting enough, or they're not unique enough, or they're not special enough. That's all a myth. When's the last time any admissions officer said to you, know what I'm looking for is super unique students? I have never had anyone tell me that. And I've been asking that question for 16 years. What do you want me to tell my students? And they say, will you tell them to answer the question, please? And stop trying so hard to impress me? Amazing, but it's true. I think I have time for 2 more questions. So if you have more, put them in the Q&A or the chat. And I also have a few more here. Sherry says, how do you know a draft is the best you'll get from a particular student? You may have heard me talk in the past about willingness and ability. It's one of my favorite topics, balancing willingness and ability. If you follow a standard process so you know where you are at all times, you can have time and energy and brain space to reflect on your students' willingness and ability to do the work. So every week we do a report on every student. And one of the things we reflect on is the student's willingness and ability. Did they show up? Were they prepared? Did they need 20 reminders? Is this kid a stellar writer, but is really a pain in the neck and won't listen to anything I say? Is this kid a basic writer, but it's okay? Their topic is effective, their essay's coming along, they're improving, they're willing to put the time and the work in. You know they're done because you've gone through your whole process. For us, that means we got to step 10. Step 7, 8, 9, 10, that might be 2 drafts, that might be 3, it might be 4. It's okay. But within about 4 weeks for that first essay, we are done. That's all I'm going to get out of them. And that's all I wanted. That's all I want to put into it because I want to move on to supplements and PIQs and activities lists and other things. So you know you're done when you've given them the opportunity to make editorial decisions along the way. They've either taken those opportunities or they haven't. So your role as a coach, as an essay coach, as a counselor, is to use a process to keep yourself on track, to give students guidelines and guardrails. And when it's done, it's done. That's okay. And that's all right. Even if you can imagine the essay being somehow better, great. When they're done with college, they can rewrite it and it'll be a stronger piece of writing. That's not the point. Phoebe says, I finished the program and love it. Oh, thanks, Phoebe. Does the essay workbook work for other essay prompts, such as some competitive summer programs? Yes, it does. The idea, the concept, make sure you understand the prompt. Step 1, always important, no matter what they're writing for. Brainstorm ideas. Step 2, have the student, make sure the student understands the prompt and can at least come up with some starter ideas for a conversation. Focus on theme. What are you going to write about and why? Works for any kind of essay. Content, write a content draft. Works for any kind of essay. For students who've written many essays and are now modifying them for other prompts, let's say you've written one, why this college, why this major essay, and you're writing another one. Understanding the prompt is, how is this prompt similar to and different from the prompt you already answered? And then their first draft might be content structure and polish because all they're doing is making a few changes. But you make sure the content is solid before you comment on anything else. So yes, the process works for any kind of essay, works for any kind of writing. That's how we developed it. It's been great to be with you. Send me more questions if you have them. Susan at whilewritingworkshop.com. We'll see you next time. Bye.